In the heart of the snowy forest, where the winds drew twisting patterns on the white blanket, young Eva searched for medicinal herbs. These herbs were not just rare in such a season, they were vital to her pregnant mother, a woman who carried a new life under her heart, despite all the hardships that fate threw her way. Eva was an unusual child. Her father was a poor ice mage whose spells could protect their home from the winter cold, but not from starvation. And her mother was a wolf girl whose genes gave Eva unique abilities and a connection to nature. As Eva cautiously made her way through the dense thickets, her heart filled with warmth at the thought of her mother's help. However, the world of the forest was not as welcoming as it might seem at first glance. Eve sensed the attention of the other forest dwellers, pureblood wolves, entities whose pride caused them to despise all who did not conform to their ideals of blood purity. Sounds of laughter broke the silence, filling the forest with taunts and sneers at Eve. They mocked her vegan beliefs, which were so far removed from their worldview. The situation escalated when one of the wolves, wanting to humiliate Eve further, threw a rock at her. This act was not just an act of aggression, it was an expression of deep hatred for the half-breeds, for those who, in their opinion, violated the purity and order of their world. After the brutal attack, Eve, gripped by pain and despair, fell to her knees. Her eyes filled with tears, her heart beating in time with the trembling of her hands trying to gather the medicinal herbs her mother needed. In that moment of weakness, when the whole world seemed hostile and cold to her, one of the purebred wolves approached her. Eve, sensing danger approaching, instinctively froze, preparing for another blow. However, when the pureblood reached for her, perhaps to strike again or mock her even more, she, in a move full of desperation and fear, raised her hands sharply in her defense. At this critical moment, fear turned into strength. In Eva's hands, perhaps due to her unique origin and hidden abilities, was a magical shard of ice. This shard, filled with the elemental energy her father possessed, became an unexpected weapon in her hands. As the pureblood approached, Eve scratched at him without even realizing it, defending herself from the perceived threat. This action, though driven by an instinct for self-preservation, showed her not only as a victim, but as a being capable of defending herself. The pureblood's reaction to this unexpected turn was immediate and furious. He felt hurt and humiliated that the half-breed, whom he considered beneath him, had dared not only to confront, but also to wound him. This act of Eve's angered him, not only because of the physical pain, it was a blow to his pride and his perception of his own unrivaledness. This clash of worldviews between Eve and the pureblood reflected the depth of the gulf separating their worlds and beliefs. Eva, boldly putting her magic ice shard forward, prepared for another attack. However, the pureblood wolf, instead of the expected caution or retreat, only flared up even more with rage. With sudden force, he pushed Eva, and she flew straight to the nearest tree, unable to keep her balance. The hard bang of her head against the hard bark instantly transported her consciousness to another dimension of time and space, where she was completely different. In this distant memory that emerged from the depths of her subconscious, Eva saw herself as an ordinary girl immersed in reading the novel Little Red Riding Hood. However, this version of the story was radically different from the usual fairy tale narrative. The main character in her reading was not just a girl going to her grandmother's house, but the powerful head of the half-blood dragons. This Red Riding Hood led her subjects through wars and battles, facing incredible challenges and dangers. At the very epicenter of these military whirlwinds, Hood met a half-breed wolf named Scion, who, burning with the desire to bring his sister back to life, infiltrated the heart of the conflicts. An irresistible attraction has developed between Hood and Zion, despite the seemingly irreconcilable nature of their worlds. Hood, won over by his determination, courage, and sincerity, accepted Scion not just as an ally, but made him a part of her own life, drawing him into the circle of her closest and most trusted. This memory that flashed before Eve's eyes the moment she collided with the tree was not just an echo of the past or a fantasy. It filled her with renewed strength and the realization that even in the toughest challenges, one can find the willpower to fight and unexpected alliances that will bring about important changes in her life and the lives of those standing beside her. In the old days, Eva had a warm and affectionate regard for this novel, which was special to her and which she read with genuine pleasure. She especially loved the characters in the story, Zion and Riding Hood, whose relationship developed so touchingly and beautifully that she couldn't help but cringe as she followed their every move. Ava dreamed how wonderful it would be to see it all with her own eyes, to feel the fullness of the characters' experiences, their happiness and sadness, as if to become an invisible witness to their story. However, the present circumstances were far more unusual and unexpected than Eve could have imagined. Like chapters from her favorite novel, she found herself in the middle of the events of this exciting story, but not as a mere observer, but as a direct participant, finding herself at the very epicenter of the plot that has so gripped her in the past. Sitting in a pool of blood, surrounded by purebloods who were an important part of the plot, Eve realized the depth and reality of what was happening. This moment was a point of redefinition for her, when the imaginary world to which she had felt such tender affection suddenly became her new reality. This reality brought with it not only delight and wonder, but also the realization that Eve was now part of a world that had previously seemed to her only a fantasy. She understood that she would have to go through a lot of trials and adventures described in the pages of her favorite book, but already as an actor, able to influence the course of events and the outcome of the story. In a moment of illumination, when Eve realized her place in this magical yet dangerous world of the novel, her spirit rebelled against her preordained destiny. Realizing who she was in this story made her act decisively and without fear in the face of the purebloods, those who had previously seemed an insurmountable obstacle. Her actions were full of courage and desperation, for she realized that every step she took now carried the weight of fate, not only for herself, but for all who would be involved in her story. Inwardly, she directed her resentment toward the author of the novel, blaming him for the injustice of her situation, wondering why exactly she had to face such hardships. At the same time, in a completely different corner of this world, her pregnant mother, affectionately stroking her rounded belly, she indulged in dreams of her child's future, hoping for a happy and carefree life. Unaware of the turbulence of her daughter's fate, enjoyed the calm and peace, anticipating the birth of her son Zion. This contrast between the calm idyll of maternal happiness and the storm of emotions raging in Eva's soul emphasized the complexity and multiplicity of the world into which she was thrown. The unborn Zion, whom his mother thought of so carefully, was unknowingly already a key figure in this story, whose fate was inextricably linked to that of Eve. In ancient times, when the world was young and full of mystery, two great races, half-wolves and half-dragons, lived in a state of fragile peace, broken by one fateful event. Tales say that the root of their age-old feud goes back to the distant past, when one of the half-wolves dared to steal the heart that belonged to the majestic head of the dragons. This act didn't just offend the proud dragons, it caused a deep tragedy, the death of their great dragoness whose heart had been stolen. The tragedy of this moment could not be forgotten or forgiven. Hood, the leading spokeswoman for the dragons, was faced with an indescribable loss. Her broth had only one heart. In the heat of her pain and despair, she did not hesitate to blame the half-wolves for what had happened, crying out for revenge for her spilled blood and lost love. From that time on, the two races developed a serious feud, which turned into bloody clashes that went down in history as the beginning of long and ruthless battles for dominance and honor. Among those caught up in this war was Eve, a creature whose life was cut short in the first moments of the battle. Her death was only one of many, each of which left an indelible mark on the souls of those who survived. Eve's death symbolized not only the loss of the life of a young and hopeful soul, but also reminded us of the price to be paid in conflicts born of hatred and misunderstanding. Eve, seized by furious anger and despair, became a symbol of the struggle against the fate predetermined by the inexorable author. In her hands was a cleaver that became not just a tool, but a companion in this battle. With each blow on the walls of her home, it was as if she was trying to break the invisible shackles of her fate, inscribed by another's hand. This fate brought her only misery, from the dreary days of her poor childhood to her foretold instant death, an event devoid of any meaning or importance. Deep down, Eve refused to accept this path filled with nothing but painful trials, and dreamed of a path where she could mold her own destiny. When her mother heard those sounds of struggle, she rushed to her daughter, fear enveloping his heart. Ava blinked and blamed the destruction of their home on the pureblood wolves that were still nearby, because of what it could prove. The accusations hurled toward the purebloods were a way for her to explain the inexplicable, dark foreboding that some unknown force wished them harm. She suggested that their lives were in danger, and that the only way to save them was to leave their familiar place and go where civilization gives way to wilderness, deep into the forest. At that moment, her mother's embrace became a fortress for Ava, a symbol of unconditional support and understanding. Together they stood at the threshold of the unknown future, preparing to leave everything familiar and dear, to step together into the unknown that the dark, impenetrable forest held. This moment was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, full of uncertainty, but also hope that even in the most difficult conditions, salvation and a path to light can be found. Fate, capricious and unpredictable, once again intervened in Eve's life, rewriting her plans and testing her spirit. The birth of Zion was both a blessing and a test for their family. This moment, which should have been the beginning of a new life, turned tragic due to lack of help and support. Their mother, exhausted from childbirth and burdened with caring for a newborn, faced the harsh reality of their secluded life. At this critical moment, standing on the edge between life and death, her mother made one last request to Eve: to keep kindness in her heart despite all the troubles and injustices that had befallen them. These words, imbued with deep maternal love and care, became a testament for Ava, echoing in her soul. The slowly fading light in her mother's eyes marked the end of one era in Eva's life, and the beginning of a new one, filled with the overwhelming weight of loss, but also with an unwavering determination to move forward. Now Eve found herself alone, shouldering the burden of responsibility for the life of her younger brother Zion on her young shoulders. This sudden loss of her mother and the need to care for her newborn brother changed her life dramatically, forcing her to become stronger than ever. Eve, who found herself in the role of protector and guardian, was forced to grow up early, forgetting her dreams and desires, embarking on a path full of trials and hardships. So, in a world where every day presents her with new challenges, Eva learns to find the strength in herself to overcome them, without losing the kindness and humanity instilled in her heart by her mother's last words. One winter day, when the frosty sun barely broke through the thick branches, Eva wandered through the forest, gathering various herbs and enjoying its silence and beauty. Suddenly, amidst the snow-white blanket that lay serenely beneath her feet, a little girl appeared to her. It was so unexpected that for a moment it seemed like a mirage. But no, the girl was real. She was lying upright in the snow, and her little body was shaking with cold, her face contorted with anguish at the cruel heat heaped upon her in this winter's tale. Eve's mind instantly flashed back to her mother's words about the importance of caring and compassion for those in need. Biting her lip to hold back the pain, she bent down, picked up the frozen child in her arms and, as if she had become a mother herself, gently placed her on her back. In this manner, like an ancient statue of motherhood, Eva began to make her way through the snowy forest to her home, where an unexpected guest was already waiting for them. At home, Zion met them on the doorstep, wagging his tail so fast it looked like he was about to burst into the air with joy. His eyes shone with devotion and love. My brother was telling everyone and anyone about how well he had behaved today, expecting praise from his sister. This moment was full of warmth and comfort, invisible threads of family hearth woven around Eva and the rescued girl, creating a sense of immutable security and well-being. Zion turned to Eve with the news. He said with a noticeable concern in his voice that the rescued girl was still in a deep sleep, even though it had been 3 days since they had met in the forest. Her brother's words made Eva think seriously about the child's condition, because such a long hibernation could indicate serious health problems. With deep concern for the baby girl's fate, Eve asked Zion to bring her water and a towel. While he honored her request, she silently contemplated what step to take next. Adding to the urgency of the situation was the fact that their modest means did not allow them to pay for hospital services, which made finding a solution even more challenging. These moments of silence were filled with heavy reflection and excitement for the life of a little girl who knew nothing of her saviors, but had already become part of their world. A struggle between despair and hope was brewing in Eva's heart, for every second could be decisive in the child's fate. Unable to seek professional medical help, she realized the heavy responsibility that fell on their shoulders. Their home became not only a refuge for the weary girl, but also a place where her future fate was decided. The moment Eve gently touched the palm of the sleeping girl's hand, something incredible and mysterious happened. A subtle, barely perceptible glow began to emanate from beneath her fingers, enveloping them both in a soft light. This mysterious glow seemed to be the catalyst, awakening the girl from her long sleep. Slowly, as if dispelling the heaviness of her eyelids, she opened her eyes, a deep and rich red color that seemed to glow from within, representing windows into another mystical world. Eve, faced with this sudden and incomprehensible phenomenon, experienced a momentary attack of fear and wonder. She instinctively took a few steps back, gripped by a mixture of feelings ranging from fear to panic. Her heart thumped at the realization that before her was not just a child lost in the forest, but a creature with magical powers, a creature from legends and myths, a dragon. At this critical moment, when the house was filled with a tense atmosphere of uncertainty and fear, Zion appeared. His appearance prompted the idea that the little girl with red eyes, who had just awakened from a long sleep, was actually their leader, known in legends as Little Red Riding Hood. Eva, with his suggestion, not only provided hope of solving the mystery of their unexpected guest, but also opened the door to a world full of wonder and magic, where anything was possible, even what seemed impossible. In the depths of a mystical novel, the story unfolds around the enigmatic Hood, a girl whose fate is closely intertwined with mystery and magic. One day, in a moment of sincere conversation, Hood approached Zion, a man who was more than a friend to her, with a question that reveals the depths of their relationship, who she is to him. Zion, seized by a surge of emotion and feeling, could not hold back his tears, confessing frankly that to him the Hood was nothing but a patroness. This moment was full of drama and discovery, as the word patroness is loaded with deep meaning and devotion. In her turn, Hood, as if sharing her experience, repeated the same words, addressing Eve, a new character in their relationship. Eva, coming face to face with such an unfamiliar form of address, did not hide her embarrassment and lightly, but insistently, asked Riding Hood not to call her that way. This exchange shows not only the mutual respect between the characters, but also their internal conflicts and their different perceptions of their roles in this complex and confusing world. The mysterious presence of the Hood in the North, a place where the novel's plot did not originally place her, caused Eve a wave of bewilderment. The book describes that Hood first appears in the North only with the outbreak of the war against the half-wolves, implying a radical change in the plot. This discovery calls into question everything Eve has known about the world of the novel up to that point, emphasizing the mutability of fates and prejudices that can be overturned by unexpected turns of events. Thus, the conversation between Hood and Eve not only reveals the depths of their characters, but also hints at the uncharted horizons of the story that are yet to be explored. When Zion suddenly appeared from the shadows standing behind Eve's back, the atmosphere in the room was instantly filled with tension. Eve, whose heart beat in unison with every ticking of the clock on the wall, felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She instinctively moved forward, creating a protective barrier between her brother and Hood, as if trying to keep him safe from the possible unknown. Her mind turned to the pages of a novel where the meeting of the main characters ended in tragedy for her, and though she was only a witness to their story, the uncertainty of the future made her heart sink with fear. With a heightened sense of responsibility and a desire to protect Cap from possible shock, Eva hurriedly turned to Cap. She firmly but respectfully explained that the presence of a stranger could cause her fear or discomfort, thus emphasizing her role as a protector and mediator in this challenging situation. With such care and forethought, Eve gently but insistently guided Sion toward the room's exit, eager to prevent any conflict or misunderstanding between the characters. This moment, filled with excitement and determination, not only emphasizes the depth of the relationship between the characters and their complex interactions, but also opens a new chapter in their story, where every step can lead to unpredictable consequences. Eva, acting with the best of intentions, remains at the center of events, trying to bridge the gap between past and future, between fear and hope. At one unexpected moment in their adventures, Hood, a small and seemingly innocent girl, expressed her gratitude to Eva for her decisive actions to save her. This gesture of gratitude made Eve think about future plans and survival strategies. In the back of her mind, Eve realized that as long as Cap remained a child, she was no threat. However, the situation could have changed dramatically if Hood and Zion, the other key character in their story, had met. This clash could potentially jeopardize all of Eva's plans for the future. As she thought about it, Eve began to paint in her mind an image of a future in which she could provide security and stability, not only for herself, but also for Zion. It represented the acquisition of a castle, not overly luxurious or ornate, but rather a fortified shelter set amongst ordinary people. In this fortification, Eve saw not only physical protection from outside threats, but also a symbolic stepping stone to return to society, for their position as nameless poor wolves did not encourage people to accept them. The castle, according to her plan, was to be not just a dwelling, but a fortress, protecting them from all the troubles and misfortunes of the outside world, a place where she and Zion could feel completely safe. However, buying such a place was not just a desire for comfort or security. It was a vital step to return to society, to be accepted and recognized among others. Eve realized that without such a symbol of power and stability as her own castle, she and Zion might not be accepted or even rejected. In this fortified shelter, she saw the key to a new life where they could rediscover their place in the world, seeking harmony and understanding with those around them. The realization came to Eve suddenly, like a bolt of lightning cutting through the night sky. She realized that the key to securing a safe future for herself, and perhaps even a happy ending, lay in getting Red Riding Hood home, safe and sound. In this case, not only would Hood have given up the thought of harming Eve, but perhaps even expressed her gratitude in some form of reward. That thought lit up Eve, filling her with new hopes and plans for the future. However, as if fate had decided to make adjustments to an already difficult situation, Hood suddenly turned to ask questions that took Eve by surprise. The girl asked about her whereabouts and tried to figure out who she really was. At that moment, Eve realized a terrible truth. Hood was suffering from amnesia, having lost memories of her identity and past. This discovery caused Eva to experience a surge of emotions, including anger at the author of their fates. How could someone be so cruel as to deprive a little girl of the memory of herself, her family, and her history? Eve felt an internal struggle, torn between a sense of justice and despair in the face of such an inhuman turn of events. At the same time, this new circumstance pushed her even more eager to protect Hood and help her recover her lost memories, so that together they could find their way to the promised happy ending to their story. In an instant, Eve found herself on the floor, contemplating the situation, which was complicated by little Hood's amnesia. This unforeseen snag introduced unnecessary obstacles into their interaction, making Eve's task even more difficult. She began to question the girl about her recent memories, hoping to jog her memory in some way. However, all that Red Riding Hood could remember was her recent malaise that had swept over her like a frosty winter night. This realization prompted Eve to think about the fact that something significant must have happened before their meeting with the Hood. Sitting next to the helpless girl, Eva pondered the possibility of sharing with her the story of her own life, learned from the pages of a fascinating novel. After all, Red Riding Hood was not just a girl. Her brother owned an entire southern kingdom. But Eve realized that this amount of information might have been too taxing for the little girl in her current state. In the end, Eva was faced with a decision that required incredible courage and determination. She had to take Little Riding Hood home, despite all the risks and threats to herself. After all, for a half-wolf, as Eve was, such a journey carried deadly danger. But weighing the pros and cons, Eva realized that she couldn't do otherwise. Her determination was firm. She had to do everything she could to bring Red Riding Hood home, even if it was the biggest test of her life. When Cap, in gratitude for her rescue, apologized to Eva, admitting that she was unable to reward her financially, the atmosphere was filled with touching sincerity. Eva, however, was quick to dispel her fears, claiming that waiting for a reward was far from the top of her priority list. Still, the best reward would be to have Red Riding Hood come home. But Hood, showing unwavering determination, expressed her desire to stay with Eva until her memory was fully restored. This statement stunned Eve, for she realized that her original plan for survival now seemed to be crumbling before her eyes, bringing a sense of deep frustration and helplessness into her soul. Eve, thinking over her situation and possibilities, realized the complexity of the situation. Taking the hood under her wing not only increased the risks to her own safety, but also exacerbated the problem of finding a safe haven for both of them. In this situation, where every step could lead to unpredictable consequences, Eva realized that the upcoming journey would be a test not only for her strength and skills, but also for the depth of her heart and soul. So far, however, Eve had only heard her future moving exponentially toward poverty and hardship. Meanwhile, the dark and gloomy night forest was coming alive with noise and bustle. Soldiers were silently prowling through its thickets, determined to carry out the order that came from the brother of the Hood himself. They were determined to find the girl at any cost, creating an aura of tension and danger around that search. These soldiers slipped between the trees like shadows, each of them driven by a desire to fulfill the will of their ruler, unaware that their target was in the company of Eve, who now faced a new challenge. On that bright day, as the sun rose over the market square, the busyness and clamor of merchants and shoppers filling the air, Eva and Cap slowly made their way through the crowd. At this time, Eva, who had asked Riding Hood to call her sister, was acting quite mysteriously, her face hidden by a mask. Cap, innocently and with a slight curiosity in her voice, questioned the reason for such an unusual accessory. Eva, whose heart was burdened with mystery, lied softly that it was only a precaution to avoid catching a cold. However, the truth was much deeper than that. She had hidden her true race and even gender, trying to avoid any condescension or prejudice that might follow the revelation of her true identity. In this world of commerce and masks, where everyone played their part, there was someone to whom Eve was secretly selling the herbs she had gathered with extraordinary care and expertise. The buyer, already familiar with the high quality of her goods, could not hide his delight when he saw the next batch of fire herb. But when he learned the price, 10 gold bars per bundle, his surprise turned to shock. At that moment, Eva, showing not only her skill at trading but also her care, offered a deal that was hard to refuse. The price will drop if the buyer agrees to have Hood medically examined, thus ensuring that she not only gets the care she needs, but also demonstrating a willingness to compromise for the well-being of others. In that moment, through a simple transaction, there was a deep connection and understanding between the characters, an intertwining of their fates in one of the many vivid colors of life in the shopping plaza. That day, Eve's meeting with the buyer turned into a series of unexpected discoveries. When the buyer heard Eve's request to examine a certain patient, his surprise cut through the silence. Eva, trying to lighten the situation, quickly made up a story about the patient being her sister, sinking even deeper into the fabric of deception. The buyer, anxious to create an atmosphere of confidence, went down on one knee in front of Hood, but the little patient seemed stiff and wary in the face of the unknown. After carefully inspecting the cap, the buyer concluded the seriousness of its condition. Saying that memory could recover spontaneously sounded like a small hope in an ocean of worry. However, his curiosity persisted. He was eager to find out what had really happened to Hood and why her temperature was so high for a normal person. Eva, remaining in her role as protector of the Hood's secrets, resorted to lying again, saying that her fever had not yet broken. This moment was the culmination of an intense interaction between Eva and the customer, in which concern, doubt, and hope for recovery were intertwined. In their every movement, look, word, there was a mosaic of feelings they were trying to hide or, on the contrary, to express. And all this was happening in the presence of the Hood, whose condition was troubling and required not only medical, but also human attention, a feeling that is sometimes difficult to describe in words, but which is a true power that can work miracles. The buyer, suddenly and with an impenetrable expression, made a suggestion that made the blood in Eve's veins freeze. He mentioned the disappearance of the dragon captain's sister, an event that had stirred up the entire southern region. Eve, whose heart was beating as if for the last time, felt a growing horror at such an exact and unexpected coincidence. Her reaction was as instantaneous as it was rash. She blurted out that, as a half-wolf, she was also aware of this disturbing event. Her words, which sounded more like a clumsy attempt to draw attention away from the mysterious cap she was trying to hide, would surely have caused surprise to any observer. The buyer, however, did not go into detail, perhaps sensing an invisible boundary or realizing that his questioning might lead to undesirable consequences. With a dignity and calmness that would have been the envy of many, he made the decision not to interfere in Ava's private affairs, thus leaving a sense of unsolved mystery in the air. Ava, for her part, was deep in thought. She realized that the hat, that small but important artifact that somehow connected her to this story, had to be returned home. Thoughts of the possible threat from the dragons, who might discover her before she could act, awakened in her a mixture of fear and determination. Eve realized that time was playing against her, and every delayed moment increased the risk of unimaginable consequences. With that anxious thought, she clenched her hands into fists, ready to face the dangers that lay ahead and do everything she could to prevent a tragic outcome. At one point, Eve, brimming with determination, approached her new acquaintance with an offer to go back. Her words cut through the silence like a light breeze that suddenly penetrates an enclosed space, bringing with it notes of freshness and change. She lightheartedly decided to inquire as to what Hood preferred for lunch, aiming for an easy casualness in the conversation, despite the mysteriousness of the setting that surrounded them. Cap's answer was imbued with trust. She was ready to accept any decision Eve made, as long as it was done by her hands. This unquestioning faith in Ava made the latter think. The thought settled in her heart that perhaps this girl, clad in a mask of innocence, was really incapable of treachery. As if fate had decided to intervene in their dialogue, Cap suddenly noticed the dangling dream catchers. These mysterious objects, like guardians of peace and tranquility, stirred her, awakening memories of stormy nights full of nightmares that kept her awake. Eve, sinking into thought, recalled details from the novel that told of the heavy burden that the Hood carried on her fragile shoulders. Nights filled with fear and despair were her constant companions until Zion appeared, the key to salvation, allowing her to find solace in the embrace of tranquility and serene sleep. This discovery allowed Eve to see the Hood in a new light, realizing her vulnerability and her deeply hidden longing for the serenity that Zion had given her. Eva, always full of enthusiasm and faith in the magical power of Hood items, purchased one of the dream catchers. Cap, despite her inner doubts and reluctance, could not refuse her persistent little sister. So, ignoring Cap's quiet objections, Eve headed with excitement in her heart to the nearest shop that sold these amazing amulets. After a short absence, Ava returned, holding the cherished object in her hands. With a smile, sincerely believing in the magical properties of the Dreamcatcher, she knelt down on one knee in front of Cap and handed her this symbol of protection and peace. With tenderness and warmth in her voice, she promised that the Dreamcatcher would cherish every dream of Little Riding Hood, driving away nightmares and attracting only good, joyful dreams. Cap, overwhelmed with excitement and gratitude, pressed the precious gift to her heart, feeling a sudden surge of confidence and calm. Words of gratitude slid velvetly from her lips, filled with sincere appreciation for such a token of attention and friendship. At that moment, a special bond was forged between the girls, strengthened by shared feelings and mutual understanding. Then, holding hands as a symbol of unwavering support and mutual care, they slowly made their way home. Step by step, under the golden sunset, their hearts were filled with warmth and confidence that true friendship can overcome any difficulties and give hope even in the darkest times. The day Eve stepped the threshold of her home, she found a warm and cozy picture. Cap, the newest member of their unusual family, was carefully weaving pigtails for Zion, a small creature with wolf-like features. The reunion with the sisters was full of warmth and joy. The exchange of greetings and tender hugs immediately filled the room with a sense of family comfort. Soon after the brief interaction, Eve, fearing the worst consequences, quietly whispered to Zion with a question that could change their entire future relationship. Her voice barely cut the silence when she asked if Zion had decided to show the Hood his wolf ears, a secret sign of their unique origins. At that moment, time seemed to stand still, and tension hung in the air as Zion froze, caught off guard by a question that could reveal their secret to a new family member. While they were going through these moments of uncertainty, Eve remembered how they had given Hood a new name, Ruby. This choice was no accident. Eve was well aware that the girl's real name, Rachel, carried a deep secret, revealing the origin of the Hood from another world, a world where she had once been lost. Using that name could inadvertently give away Eve's knowledge of Hood's true identity and past, which could lead to unintended consequences and problems in the future, especially when it came time to bring Ruby back to her homeworld. This moment was filled not only with concern for secrecy, but also with a deep realization that each of their actions could affect the fates of everyone involved. Zion, trapped between the desire to be open with his new friend and the need to protect his secret, was in a state of inner conflict, while Eve, carefully trying to preserve the vulnerable world of their small family, was willing to do anything to protect her loved ones from possible future chaos. When dinner time came, the atmosphere in the house changed markedly, bringing with it new customs and little secrets. With the arrival of Hood, who had recently become a part of their lives, there was a noticeable change in the routine. One of these changes was the way they now sat down at the table. With childlike directness and trust, Cap asked Eve to hold hands. Eve, sensing in this gesture a desire to strengthen their new bond, accepted the offer. Together, holding hands, they sat at the table, creating a new ritual to symbolize their unity and harmony. Zion, always observant and attentive to detail, could not fail to note one peculiarity in the behavior of the Hood. He found it odd that she favored food exclusively in chilled form. This deviation from common tastes aroused his curiosity and bewilderment. This behavior was not a mere quirk, but something more significant, connected to her unique nature. Hood, being a draconian, had difficulty eating hot food. The secret of her preference lay in her nature. The heat of the food mixed with the inner fire that bubbled in her being, causing her discomfort and malaise. For dragons, whose existence is inextricably linked to the element of fire, such an interaction could cause a serious ailment. Eva, at first unaware of this connection, soon realized the uniqueness of Hood's situation. This realization did not come immediately, but it opened up to her a new understanding of the complexity and diversity of a world in which every being, regardless of their unique traits, strives to find harmony and comfort in the everyday aspects of life. Thus, the dining table became a place not only for family bonding, but also for understanding each other's deepest features, emphasizing the uniqueness of each member of this unusual family. In this home, where every day was filled with small miracles and warm feelings, Eve found a way to use her unique abilities to help Hood. The ice magic Eve possessed was the key to figuring out how to ease her new ward into life, reducing the discomfort of the internal heat for her. Symbolically, it was the holding of hands during dinner that became not only a gesture of unity and family coziness, but also a way of passing that cool magic to Hood, allowing her to enjoy her meal without discomfort. Seeing how Eva was affectionate and caring with Hood, Zion, a little boy with a wolf's heart full of tenderness and attention, could not refrain from slight jealousy. Eve, always sensitive and attentive to the emotions of her children, hastened to give affection to Zion as well. In this way, she demonstrated that the love and care in their family extended to everyone without exception, maintaining a warm atmosphere of mutual understanding and support. The next morning, when silence still reigned in the house, and the morning rays were just beginning to illuminate it, Eva, already packed and ready to head to the market, was faced with an unexpected obstacle. Sleepy Hood, as if sensing the impending absence of her new protector and friend, hugged Eve, begging her to stay and join them in the dream realm. At this moment, Eve's heart was filled with warmth and regret in the face of such an innocent request. However, she knew she had bigger challenges ahead of her. Money had to be earned to provide for their family and move to a safer place where they could start a new life far from the dangers that lurked at every turn. So in the face of this daunting task, Eva gently but firmly explained to Cap the importance of her decision. She spoke of a future full of hopes and dreams, where every member of their small but strong family could find their place and find long-awaited peace. These words contained not only the promise of a better future, but also a strong belief that together they could overcome any difficulties. Hood seemed to understand the depth of concern and worry that Eve felt, realizing that her nighttime adventures could have turned out to be a disaster. Suddenly, from the depths of her nightgown, small hands extracted a shiny gold ring, the secret trophy of forest wanderings. This gesture, though a confession of disobedience, became a bridge between hearts, uniting them with a common desire for care and understanding. There was great wisdom in this small act of little Hood's. Sometimes even a small adventure or mistake can lead to big and important lessons. And at the same time, Eve showed that love and understanding can overcome any obstacle, even if it seems insurmountable. After all, their relationship is based not only on mutual promises and games, but also on a deep sense of trust and mutual support that makes their family strong and invincible in the face of any adversity. Eve, though she tried to remain stern as she explained the dangers that lurked outside their cozy confines, could not resist the genuine sadness and remorse in Cap's eyes. The words that she would be back early for snowball games sounded like a promise not only of fun, but also of the security Eva wanted to provide for each member of her unusual, but so warm family. Eva, in conversation with her ward, suggested having a fun winter game of snowballs, but only on the condition that Shapochka went to bed without further objection. The little girl, catching on to the interesting suggestion, nodded in agreement, familiarizing herself with the fact that plans for tomorrow had already been set. Before she left, Eve left a note that the ring Hood found would stay with her for now, not be put up for sale. This decision was made despite Hood's obvious hints indicating her desire to get rid of this accessory. After Eve left the room, Hood was alone, and her feelings and thoughts began to stir within her with renewed vigor. The little girl could not conceal her irritation and displeasure at the sentimentality of Eve, who, in her opinion, was overly attached to things and unable to take decisive action even when hints were given directly. In the back of her mind, Red Riding Hood believed that Eva's reluctance to part with the ring, despite the obvious clues, was not just a display of weakness or sentimentality, but something more serious, a sin of stupidity. This moment opened a deep chasm between the adult and child's perception of the world, where every detail, every gesture and word had a deep layer of misunderstanding and differences in perception of values and priorities. In the not-too-distant past, when Cap was still dwelling within the confines of her domestic sanctuary, a heavy cloud of uncertainty hung over her head. She was given a mysterious diagnosis, the name of which sounded like a cryptic riddle, an idiopathic disease that manifested itself as an unbearable fever spreading through her body, like a fire through a dry forest. The maid, a woman whose words usually carried comfort and support, turned to the Cap's brother with a message as heavy as a lead bullet. A warning sounded from her lips, as if fate had already begun its grim countdown. It was time to prepare for the most unimaginable outcome. The brother, a man with a heart full of love and concern for his sister, seized with anger and despair, refused to accept this grim prospect. His mind flatly rejected the idea that Hood, his dear sister, could have been the victim of such a sinister inheritance. In this whirlwind of emotion, as the soul sought a way out of the abyss of despair, the unexpected happened. The brother suddenly felt an uncontrollable fire in his breast, a symbol of his uncontrollable anger and powerlessness in the face of the unknown illness of the Riding Hood. That inner fire raging within him made him gasp, as if the very nature of his being rebelled against him, reflecting the chaos and despair that reigned in his heart. At that moment, when the world around him seemed full of despair and darkness, something happened that brought a spark of hope. Cap, as if sensing her brother's storm of emotions, suddenly awakened from her restless slumber. Her brother, instantly setting aside his fears and worries, hurried to her bedside. An invisible thread of connection vibrated in the air between them, and they instinctively reached for each other, longing for the physical contact that could be their solace. However, realizing the potential danger that their mutual heat could cause even more harm, the brother stopped, as if grasping at the last moment for sanity in a sea of emotion. Cap, taking advantage of this moment of calm, shared with her brother the nightmare that had overtaken her in her sleep, as if trying to find comfort and understanding in his eyes. At the same time, as if fate had decided to put them to the test, rumors began to spread in the world that her brother had only one heart, putting his honor and dignity in doubt. Hood, not wanting her brother to suffer from unfounded accusations and speculation, made the decision to challenge these rumors. She fled, determined to destroy this slander and restore her brother's good name, leaving him in a daze at the surprise of her act. The brother, seized by a new wave of fear for the fate of the Cap and a burning desire to protect her from all adversity, mobilized all his forces and resources for the search. He was ready to scour every corner of the north, every snowy valley, and every forest just to find his sister. His determination knew no bounds, and he was willing to do anything to keep Hood safe and reunite with her, regaining the lost peace and harmony in their family circle. Rumors, like the wind, carry quickly and unpredictably, changing their direction depending on the listeners and their imagination. Thus, one day, news reached the brother of the Cap that his sister was seen in the main square of the city in the company of a stranger, who, according to eyewitnesses, presented her with a dream catcher as a sign of attention or perhaps protection. This information caused a storm of emotion in his brother and strengthened his conviction that behind the disappearance of Riding Hood is an insidious wolf masquerading as a stranger. Determination and a thirst for action drove him to go to the square in person, hoping to solve the mystery and bring his sister home. Meanwhile, life in the square continued as usual. Eva came back to the alley to sell herbal medicine. Her goods were in demand by locals who valued natural remedies and health maintenance. However, on this day she was approached by a drug addict, a man seeking relief for his painful addiction through the herbs Eva was selling. Although Eve needed the money to sustain her business and subsistence, she recognized the dangers and morality of interacting with addicted people. With a strong sense of responsibility and moral principles, she could not afford to get involved in matters that would bring harm to others, even to the detriment of her own well-being. Thus, on that day, the square became an arena for intertwining destinies and stories, where everyone sought their own salvation, whether in a personal encounter, in search of a lost loved one, or in a quest to uphold their beliefs and moral principles. In one of those unexpected twists of fate, when every detail seems to be destined by unknown forces, the attention of a man addicted to dangerous substances was attracted by a shiny object carrying a deep meaning. It was a ring worn by Eve on a thin string around her neck, like an amulet that held the secrets of the past and the future. His request for the sale of this symbolic object sent a shiver of excitement through Eve, causing a flurry of emotions to surge through her. The ring was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a part of her essence, an embodiment of memories and dreams. Refusing to part with such a significant symbol of her life, Eva, in an attempt to push away the intrusive buyer, set a price for it beyond reason: 50 million. The amount was so astronomical that any conversation about buying would have to stop. Her words, however, were not interpreted in the way she had intended. Instead of retreating, the man felt humiliated, taking her response as a mockery of his plight. The situation escalated to a breaking point, and to prevent further violence, Eva resorted to something unexpected. Using a gift that seemed beyond reality, she turned to the powers of frost granted to her by the mysterious circumstances of her life. Concentrating, she summoned a chill that, like a fine needle, penetrated through the air and froze the aggressor's brain, chilling his ardor and desire to fight. This act not only demonstrated her power, but deeply symbolized her desire to protect not only herself, but also her connection to the past encased in the ring. Thus, Eve left her detractor in a state of confusion and retreat, while she herself remained standing, surrounded by an aura of not only physical, but also moral superiority. After the vicissitudes of the day when Eve had faced danger, she had found temporary peace like a night filled with silence after a storm. This state gave her the opportunity to reflect on the events unfolding in her life like the pages of a book written by an unknown author. Amidst the whirlwind of thoughts and feelings she was experiencing, one goal loomed large: to return the ring to the Hood. There was no doubt in her heart as to the origin of the ring. Eva was convinced that Red Riding Hood, this little owner of a big heart, could not have found the ring in the woods as she claimed. The ring had undoubtedly belonged to her, to Red Riding Hood, and had been lost, perhaps at some important moment in her life. As she thought about Red Riding Hood, Eva couldn't get rid of her thoughts about her brother. Surprisingly, he still hadn't found his way to their hiding place, hidden deep in the forest. There was something both comforting and unsettling about it. The cozy, though mysterious house where they had taken refuge seemed cut off from the world, a place where time flowed differently, and where every step into the forest revealed new secrets. But at the same time, Eve wondered if they were too isolated, being so far away from the rest of the world. The piercing thought that she might be perceived as a kidnapper suddenly overwhelmed Eve. This comparison, which had arisen in the back of her mind, made her look at the situation from a different angle. Standing back from her intentions and actions for a moment, She tried to see the picture through the eyes of an outside observer. Is it possible that her good intentions and her desire to help Red Riding Hood could be interpreted in a completely different way? The thought that her actions might be perceived as kidnapping momentarily darkened the bright thread of her thoughts. But despite these doubts, deep down, Eva knew that she was driven solely by a desire to help and protect. She hoped that time and her actions would prove her true intentions. In the heart of winter enchantment, amidst the vast silence of the snowy forest, Eve, clad in a robe of frosty patterns, felt the icy air around her grow even denser and colder with each step. She, as the Lord of Winter magic, sensed something unusual. The presence of another being pacing behind her in the creaking snow, whose breath tried to break the magical silence of the forest. Eve's calmness was replaced by determination for a moment. In her hand, the apple, once juicy and red, was now covered in frost, turning into an icy artifact. With a strength drawn from the very essence of winter, she ordered her stealthy pursuer to emerge from the shadows between the trees that stood as guardians of the eternal winter. Meanwhile, in a world far removed from the snowy forest and its mystical inhabitants, Zion was in the safety and warmth of his own home. Surrounded by his favorite toys, he was engrossed in play, creating his own incredible adventures out of fantasies. But suddenly, as if the wind of a winter storm had entered the cozy room, he felt an inexplicable chill run across his skin. The sensation took him by surprise, making him wonder about its source. At the same moment, Hood, the trusted companion and protector of the home, sat beside the fireplace, trying to strengthen the flames to once again fill the house with warmth and comfort. As a true keeper of warmth, she was skillful with fire, but suddenly, catching a familiar sensation that seemed to her not just an echo of the past, but a harbinger of something significant, Hood made a hasty decision. She realized it was time to act, leaving behind a warm and cozy home to follow the call of adventure and perhaps help those in need in this unpredictable and magical world. In one of those decisive moments when fates intertwine and decisions are made in the blink of an eye, Cap turned to Zion with a serious look full of determination. Her words sounded like a tinkling coin in the still morning air. "I'm going to go save Eve!" Her voice was firm and unmistakable, and without waiting for an answer, she rushed forward like the wind to save the one she no longer hesitated to consider her sister. It wasn't just a decision, it was a call of the heart. Meanwhile, Eve, in confusion and tension, was still trying to figure out who was behind her pursuit. She supposed it might be the Hood's brother, for who else would be so insistent on following in her footsteps? However, logic dictated that if it was a dragon, it would have made its presence known by now. With each passing moment, Eve was more and more inclined to think that she had been turned over to purebred wolves, those with whom she had never shared the same ideals and aspirations. The air around them was saturated with tension, and when suddenly there was a faint rustle in the silence. Without thinking, Eve pointed the ice apple in that direction, a kind of sign of welcome and defense that could stop a pursuer, or at least make him think for a moment. This story is about courage, determination, and a bond stronger than blood ties. Hood, despite the risks, chose to save Eva, proving that in a world where persecution and fear seem every day, there is still room for courage and hope. And at the same time, Eve, trapped in uncertainty and danger, does not let her guard down and is ready to defend herself even when the enemy is hidden from view. Their fates are intertwined in the struggle not only for their own lives, but also for the deep feelings they have for each other, showing that in the fight for loved ones, any means are good. The moment the silence around her became almost palpable, Eve felt the stares. Not just one or two people, but a whole crowd. As she looked around, she realized that those dozens of eyes staring at her didn't promise anything good. It seemed to her that every look was like a weight on her shoulders, heavy and gloomy. The fire suddenly flared up around her, as if reflecting the girl's inner state of anxiety and fear. A page from a favorite novel came to mind, where a bloody massacre began, orchestrated by the Hood, a dark and ambiguous character in her story. Eve felt her heart sink with fear. As she threw the apple, she suddenly wondered if it had attracted the unwanted attention of the Hood herself. In this world where the boundaries of reality and fiction were blurred, every action could have unpredictable consequences. But at the most tense moment, when the smell of burning and danger was already in the air, he, the brother of the Hood, appeared. His appearance was so unexpected that even the flames seemed to stand still for a moment, waiting for his next move. It was not clear whether he was coming as a savior or a messenger of more trouble, but his presence carried with it a change. Perhaps a chance at salvation for Eve or a new twist in her already complicated fate. In that moment, time seemed to stop, giving everyone a chance to rethink what was happening and make a decision that could change everything. Eva was on the verge of despair. Her breathing was ragged, as if she had just escaped from a maze of fear. And now, standing in front of her brother, she couldn't find the words to express the most important thing: that Red Riding Hood was completely safe. All she could squeeze out was a statement that she had done no harm, but the brother, whose distrust was as palpable as the wall between them, brushed off her words as delusional fantasies. Eva, feeling despair clutching her from the inside, gathered the last of her strength into a fist of will, gritted her teeth and, unable to hold back any longer, grasped his hand decisively. Her eyes burned with pleading. He just needed to hear her, to realize that there were fates behind their argument, not just words. But he, in his attempt to free himself, gave vent to his essence, and his fire flared up, clashing with the frost cold coming from Eve. Steam began to rise around them, creating around them an arena of fighting elements, where each of them defended not only his point of view, but also his destiny, his right to the truth. This battle of the elements symbolized the deep conflict tearing them apart from the inside, showing that sometimes words cannot convey the depth of feelings, and only their clash can awaken understanding. As the last flames were vanquished and silence finally descended upon the neighborhood, the Hood's brother, whose face reflected a storm of emotion, looked at Eve with a question hovering in the air. Who was she, this stranger who was able to extinguish the dragon flames with such ease? Eve, whose body trembled with fatigue and whose eyes were clouded with exhaustion, found the strength to answer. As if the last drops of energy were left just for this confession, she admitted that she had been taking care of Hood all this time before her words were cut short by an explosion of emotion. With bitterness in her voice, she exclaimed that no amount of money could compensate her for the labor and suffering she had endured in caring for the girl, especially after her brother, without trying to understand the circumstances, attacked her with accusations. These words, like the last chord of a dramatic symphony, exhausted her completely. And, as a character in a tragic story, she passed out, moving from the world of struggle and confrontation to the serenity of fainting, leaving the Cap's brother to ponder what had happened, realizing the depth of her sacrifices and the magnitude of her misunderstanding. A sudden scream that cut through the silence made everyone turn around. Hood had finally arrived and her face was filled with indignation, ready to burst out. Her eyes blazed with rage directed toward her brother, who she felt had done an unforgivable act by hurting Eve. Words full of accusation and anger flew from her mouth like arrows aimed at the heart of her abuser. She called him a villain, defending the Eva she now considered her sister, testifying to the depth of the bond between them. Time stretched slowly as Eva lay in her bed, immersed in a serene sleep, away from all worries and conflicts. But as soon as she came to her senses, a mosaic of memories began to assemble in her mind. Separate fragments of conversations, filled with the emotions Hood expressed while protecting her, slowly formed into a coherent picture. Eve realized how much she meant to the Cap, whose protection and care now seemed infinitely precious to her. Suddenly, with renewed vigor, she felt the magnitude of the conflict that had occurred, and all that it had built up inside her. This realization literally made Eve jump up in her bed, suddenly realizing the gravity and complexity of the situation. As soon as Eve jumped up, realizing the gravity of the moment, her space was filled with warmth and affection. The children, like little birds seeking warmth and comfort, instantly surrounded her, wrapping their arms around her, seeking comfort and security. It was at this moment that Eve realized that during her rest, they had not left her side in the slightest. Zion, with a small heart full of fears and worries, did not hold back his emotions, expressing deep concern for Eve. He thought she was gone from them forever, which drove him to the edge of despair and tears. Cap, standing nearby, nodded in support of Sion's words, admitting that she too secretly shared his fears. They were both on edge, even seeing Eva in full health in front of them. Tears stubbornly came to their eyes, as if an ocean of worry was ready to burst out. Eva, feeling this boundless love and care, wrapped her arms around the children as if trying to protect them from all the hardships of the world. At this moment, the silence was broken by the voice of Sion, who, with a note of hope in his voice, said that the brother of the hood had gone away, but would surely return. These words made Eve think. She realized that she was talking about Shapochka's brother, the very man around whom the recent events had revolved. Her heart was filled with hope for a resolution to the conflict that loomed over them like a heavy cloud ready to rain down at any moment. But the warmth of the children filled her heart with light, giving her the strength to believe in a better future for all of them. The memory of that moment when Eve felt her strength slipping away, leaving her in utter helplessness, suddenly swept over her mind. She remembered how her hand had touched Brotherhood's arm, and how at the last moment before she was plunged into darkness, she thought her body was beginning to undergo a change. Waking up, she began groping herself with incredible caution, her heart racing with fear that her wolf ears or tail might have manifested during her unconsciousness. But, to her incredible relief, everything remained just as it was supposed to be. At that second, just as Eva calmed herself down, Hood's brother walked into the room. His first words were complaints about the quality of their home, which made Eve momentarily speechless with surprise. Her surprise reached a climax when, against all expectations, he turned to thank her. The words of gratitude for taking care of Cap sounded so sincere that Eve forgot about everything in the world for a moment. This gesture, unexpected and so human, touched her heart deeply. Under the weight of these emotions, she felt the ice of misunderstanding begin to melt around them, giving way to a warm relationship and mutual understanding. Despite all the previous disagreements and conflicts, this moment was a testament to the fact that even in the most difficult relationships, there is always room for forgiveness and gratitude. Eva realized that regardless of background and differences, empathy and understanding can be a strong foundation for new, lasting relationships. A hope was kindled in her soul that only clear days lay ahead of them, illuminated by the light of mutual respect and friendship. There was a certain tension in the air as they both took their seats at the table, as if the invisible shadow of past misunderstandings had not yet dissipated completely. Noel Ramier, a dragon with refined manners against all expectations, introduced himself and apologized for the previous surprise attack in the dense thickets of the forest. This act of contrition was more than just words to Eve. It was proof that the world is not so one-sided, and the creatures that inhabit it are capable of doing things beyond stereotypes. Eve, reflecting on what she had heard, could not help but recognize Noel's politeness, which blurred the boundaries between myth and reality. In her heart she found understanding for his anger, for she herself would have acted just as strongly if she had believed Zion had been kidnapped. However, despite her understanding, Eve realized that Noel's actions had gone beyond the bounds of what was allowed, and that could not go unnoticed. However, as she looked at him, she felt a hitherto unknown fluttering feeling seize her heart, like the tickling sensation of the gentle touch of a spring breeze. This sensation gently but insistently encouraged her to rethink what was happening, bringing a note of unpredictability to their relationship and making Eve's heart beat faster. Watching the expression on Eve's face, which could have seemed to be an expression of malaise, Noel felt uneasy, thinking that she was suddenly unwell. However, to dispel this heavy atmosphere, Eva cleverly shifted the conversation to a safer direction, returning to Noel's biography. In response to her questions, Noel shared that his little sister was Rachel. But at that moment, Hood, showing genuine bewilderment, inquired about whom they were talking about. Noel was puzzled and disturbed by the behavior he thought his sister was displaying by pretending to be a stranger to him. It seemed so strange and incomprehensible to him that he could not hide his excitement. Hood, for her part, reacted with bewilderment and with a sudden impulse jumped into Eve's arms, saying that Noel was very strange to be sure that she was his sister. Eve, finding herself in the middle of this difficult situation, felt the weight of responsibility for resolving the confusion. She knew a secret she could not reveal, the fact that Noel was indeed Hood's own brother. The difficulty was that Shapochka suffered from amnesia, which made a direct confession impossible. In such a state of affairs, Eve had to show exceptional ingenuity and wisdom to find a way of verifying parentage that would not only confirm the connection between Noel and Cap, but would do so as delicately as possible so as not to traumatize Cap's psyche or aggravate her condition. Thus, Eve found herself faced with the task of solving this mystery, shouldering the heavy task of repairing the broken family bonds. The moment the space between Noel and the hood was traversed by their outstretched arms, the world around them stopped for a moment, as if nature itself held its breath in anticipation of a miracle. And then, when their palms were almost touching, fire erupted between them, illuminating their faces with a soft but bright light. That fire dancing and playing between their hands was more than a mere flame. It was that sign, that proof of the deep and abiding kinship that bound their hearts and souls together. However, when she saw this unexpected sign, she could not conceal a flash of fear. Her reaction was instantaneous and instinctive. She jumped back, as if trying to hide from the unknown and powerful thing that could be hidden in this sign. And, as if seeking comfort and protection, she clung to Eve, seeking in her support and peace in this moment of uncertainty. Zion, who had been watching the scene, turned to Eve with unwavering calmness, as if trying to convey some of his confidence and stability to her. Eve, in turn, looked at him and saw in his eyes a reflection of her own worries. She thought that perhaps he was feeling the same anxiety that she was feeling at that moment. With this thought, seeking comfort and support, she asked him to give her a hand. This simple gesture asked not only for physical support, but also for deep human empathy, understanding, and a willingness to stand together in the face of the unknown. At the moment when Sion, as if following Eve's request, gently but firmly took Hood's hand, the atmosphere around him seemed to be filled with a secret meaning. This gesture, despite its apparent simplicity, left Noel in a state of bewilderment, as if a scene from another reality had unfolded before his eyes, where the usual order of things had been disrupted. At that very moment, Ava, watching carefully what was happening, turned to Shapochka with a question overflowing with sincere concern. Did she feel better after all the experience? Cap responded with a nod, as if to confirm that Eve's actions had not been in vain, and there was more than gratitude in that nod. At that moment, looking at Noel, Hood looked at him with a sly look that would have confused anyone. That look, filled with indescribable emotions and secret thoughts, became like a bridge connecting their inner worlds, where every look and every movement had its own special meaning. In spite of all the events that had taken place, Riding Hood did not seek solace in solitude. She remained in Eve's arms, seeking protection and peace there. Eva, for her part, continued to hug Hood, enveloping her in warmth and affection, while her thoughts were filled with regret for Noel. Deep down, Eva felt sorry for him, for in the eyes of the Hood, he now seemed a villain, an image conjured up by misunderstandings and circumstances that made him appear in such a light. This moment was a turning point, not only for the participants of the events, but also for their relationships, because every action and every word spoken at that moment carried a deep meaning and changed the course of their destinies, weaving new patterns of mutual understanding and mutual feelings into the general fabric of history. Eva, gathering her thoughts, decided to tell Noel the secret that had long troubled her heart. She told him about how Little Riding Hood had lost her memory, like a white sheet on which a drawing of future memories had yet to be drawn. Noel, after listening to the story, did not hesitate to conclude that the cause of the Cap's amnesia was wolves, creatures shrouded in the darkness of legends and lore, whose shadows constantly haunted his thoughts. Gradually quieting the excitement that had gripped him after Eve's revelations, Noel turned to ask her about her own condition. Eve, with a lightness in her voice, replied that she felt fine, as if her answer brought with it a calmness, dispelling the remnants of anxiety in Noel's heart. Then Noel, as if eager to reveal to Eve the innermost recesses of his soul, shared with her the cause of his inner aggression. He confessed that the source of his outbursts was the dragon fire in his veins. This fire, like a wild beast, demanded control and containment. But Noel felt defenseless against its power, possessing only one heart. His words were full of pain and awareness of his own vulnerability, revealing the depth of the inner conflict he faced every day.